Hi, my name is Angela Ford, and this is my critical thinking research capstone video presentation. We're going to go with the first slide. The first slide is the title, which is Unspoken Stigma, PTSD in the African American Male. And I chose this topic because this is something that I see a lot in our community and in my culture. Having family that we have a lot of those who are former servicemen and women who actually struggle with this disease. So it's very interesting to me, and I wanted to talk about it. The first actual slide that I chose was they are excerpts from two different people. One of them is Tracy Morgan, who is actually an actor who went through quite a few things himself in a really bad accident years ago and really suffered some trauma. And in suffering that trauma, I can't even imagine, like when we saw the newscast of what had happened to him and in this car wreck. I can't even imagine what he is dealing with even to this day, having to relive this over and over and over again. And that's really what trauma is. So really wanted to talk about trauma, PTSD. And so he says here, delusional pain hurts just as much as pain from actual trauma. So what if it's all in your head? Interesting. The next one says, every day begins with an act of courage and hope, getting out of bed. And that's by Mason Cooley. And I thought that was super interesting because daily we have to make a conscious decision to get out of bed, to get up and get moving, and to make it count. So I thought that was something that was actually pretty encouraging to utilize. Next slide. First here, we're going to talk about our research problem, which is that PTSD is an unspoken disease that goes untreated. It's the PTSD in the African American community, as well as mental illness as a whole, is overlooked. We have stereotypes. African American males are looked upon as those who are lazy. Researchers have stated this, that they have been looked upon as those who are lazy, those who are basically criminals, those who can never get it right, always in trouble. I mean, this whole stereotype of African American males is very prevalent even today in the 2000s. The stigma surrounding it, there's so much stigma surrounding PTSD, but there's even more so stigma around mental illness, period, especially in the African American communities. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then the African American culture. It's definitely been noted that African American families, it's something, PTSD or mental health is something that we really don't talk about. I remember growing up as a little girl, definitely it was nothing that we talked about, but it was something that was kind of like a taboo. The idea is that this family is strong. And we do everything to make sure that we remain strong and we can work things out on our own, as opposed to going to these professionals that are definitely qualified to handle these issues and help us through them. So it talks about, the researchers talked about, and this was Thompson, Basil, and Akbar. They talked about the existence of cultural beliefs, such as the need to resolve family concerns within the family and the expectation that African Americans demonstrate strength. and this wasn't debated. It wasn't debated at all. And that the need to seek psychotherapy was associated with weakness and diminished pride. And that is still so prevalent today. African American culture, especially the males, and I would even venture to say, in looking at the research, even with the women, because women are looked upon as strong as well now in this day and age. They're working. Some of them are the breadwinner, even more so than the male sometimes in those situations. And so they're looked upon as, you're strong, so you can't be weak, when that's not even how God designed it. So let me go to the next slide. Next slide is our research question. What is the fear behind African American males seeking treatment for PTSD? Let me go here. Okay. So there are several things. There's a lack of trust in the medical profession. There is lack of finances. There are lack of resources. Fear of being the guinea pig. That goes all the way back to the Tuskegee experiment, where they, and I don't want to say it wrong. I believe it was where I know what it's about, but I want to say it right. It was where they actually they did use the African Americans as guinea pigs, and they gave them shots. They gave them shots, and they all got oh my gosh, I just had this conversation, and they all got syphilis. That's what it was. I'm so sorry. They all got syphilis. So of course, there's no trust there. They feel like they're misdiagnosed so often. The what people will think, that's a huge one. It's important to men, what people think about them. Because if I show that I have a mental health issue or a mental health illness, then again, I'm looked upon as a weak person, because the idea is, that it's historical. It's historical. It's a historical requirement. And this was researchers, again, Thomas, Basil, and Akbar. They talked about how the strong prohibitions on sharing information with those outside of a circle of the family and trusted friends. That's one thing. Like, you don't share that information outside of your family. In the African American culture, you keep that within, the four walls. You don't talk about it outside of that. But also, men were looked at as one who was strong. They were innately strong, and so anything that showed any kind of weakness, like they didn't complain, they didn't talk about the pain or the woes or anything that they were dealing with, because the idea is, I'm strong. I'm not supposed to be weak, and I'm not supposed to talk about the areas in which, I falter, or the areas in which I don't, to some would say, add up. But the reality is, they have struggles, and they're no different than the next one. And we have to come to grips with the idea that it's okay. It is okay to have this thing that is wrong, or this thing that is off kilter, off balance. It's okay to have that, because there is help. Lack of knowledge and anxiety. This is huge, because unfortunately, and I don't want to say that this is just in the African American culture. I'm sorry. I've read it, I've researched it. They talked about this. Researchers talked about, and psychologists have talked about, how not just the African American men, but also Hispanics, Asians, there is a tendency not to be educated in, what it is that we need to know in regards to our health. They don't research, they don't look things up, they don't dig. So that is the perception. Okay. Our research purpose is to bring awareness to the African American community and educate, encourage, and empower Black men, and then recognize they don't have to suffer in silence, and then help understand the common factors. There are so many common factors. There are so many. There's so much awareness that should take place on a regular basis, if we are open to it. Research has shown that again, they're used to, doing them. If I can use that term, that's a term that you hear the younger people say nowadays. It's like, oh, you do you, I'm gonna do me. They're used to doing them, in the sense that, again, I'm not going to tell anybody that I'm suffering. So when you see me, I'm going to be smiling. When you see me, I have this facade. I have this this false sense of I got it all together, when you really don't, and not realizing that it's really okay, because you don't know what the next person is going through. And again, I'm talking about African American males, but research has shown that there are the Caucasian males, there are Asian males, there are Hispanic males, the Pacific Islanders. All of them suffer in this way, and there's a high percentage that suffers in this way. So we don't want to be ignorant to the fact that there are many more nationalities and ethnicities that suffer in this way as well. I just chose to talk about the African American male because those are the ones that I am most close to. Okay. I loved this. This is PTSD, post-traumatic stress. There are wounds that never show on the body that are deeper and more hurtful than anything that bleeds. Don't wait until you break. This, to me, is super powerful. Like that, I feel like that said it all. Just because you don't see me hurting, just because you don't see my pain or my scar, doesn't mean that I'm not suffering. But again, as African Americans, and I think people in general, because I feel like we all do this, use your voice. Use your voice. Say what it is. Say how you're feeling. Be okay with that. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be afraid. Like, speak up. You don't get help if you never speak up. And we have to learn how to advocate for ourselves, because nobody else is going to do that. We have to do that. So, in conclusion, these are just a few things that I wanted to highlight. So, poverty is detrimental to psychological well-being, with the NIMH data indicating that low-income individuals are 2 to 5 times more likely to suffer from a diagnosable mental disorder than those of the highest SES group. And poverty poses a significant obstacle to getting help for those mental health problems. And that's so true. A lot of there are so many disparities in the African American culture, socioeconomic issues, as well as, hardships, financial hardships. Opportunities are not given a lot of times to the African American culture because of stereotypes. And so then they suffer. They suffer economically, they suffer financially, we suffer, you know, in employment, in schooling, all of it, because a lot of times we don't get the same opportunities as the next group. And so, unfortunately, we just happen to be that group. Lack of affordable health insurance. Oh my gosh, yeah. I can even speak on this personally. Being one that is not working, it's only my husband that is working, and health insurance is very expensive. It's very expensive. And so they make it very difficult for us as African Americans, and I would say even seniors, no matter what color, it's across the line. They make it very difficult for you to have good quality insurance if there's only one income. Um, so that's definitely something that is huge. Including mental health and substance abuse coverage, impedes health and well-being. Low-income groups are the targets of discrimination based on their socioeconomic status, as well as other social indicators such as race, ethnicity, and gender. Very true. If you are a female and you are African American, there are some things that are not available to us, that are available to men, or more opportunities for men than for us as an African American woman. And that's unfortunate. Psychologists, as researchers, service providers, educators, and policy advocates have a responsibility to better understand the causes of poverty and its impact on health and mental health, to help prevent and reduce the prevalence of poverty, and to effectively treat and address the needs of low-income individuals and families by building on the strengths of communities. And there were two themes that are important to the body of knowledge surrounding African American reluctance to enter therapy. The first is African Americans are reluctant to enter therapy and seek professional treatment because of cultural norms that have been proposed into African American thinking. And the second is the fear of discrimination, and race is not a factor that prevents African Americans from seeking therapy. So super true, super true. The other thing that I believe I failed to talk about is the lack of trust in the medical profession. This is a huge one. I talked about it a little bit, touching on the Tuskegee experiment. But the other part of that is when you go into, and research has shown this too, when you go into doctor's offices and you see a lot of advertisement in the doctor's offices, but they're all heavily leaning in the direction of women. There's not a lot of information in doctor's offices when you go in there for men. So of course, men are less likely to put their trust in them, because they're like, you guys really cater to, I've heard them say this, you guys cater to women, you don't really cater to men, when that is an untruth. It's just that there's not a lot out there. So it's important that those things get put in doctor's offices, in clinics, so that it's fair all the way across the board, that they understand that it's just as important that they have this knowledge of different things, different illnesses, different treatments, and all of those things, so that they have the same opportunities as the women do. I'm sorry, I didn't title this. This is my conclusion. So I just was talking about how there are many things that plague the African American communities, from seeking treatment for mental health illness, such as incarceration. We have a lot of African American males who are incarcerated. I mean, a huge percentage, much more than Caucasians or Hispanics or Asians. There's a lot of incarceration. It's heavy in incarceration for African American males, from young males to older males. Lack of finances and suicide. These hardships have increased tremendously and caused an increase, wrong spelling, sorry, in mental health issues in this as well as in this community. According to the Office of Minority Health, adult African Americans living below poverty are 3 times more likely to report serious psychological distress. So it's not that they don't report it. Like for African Americans, they will talk about, I mean, like they'll report, like, yeah, I'm feeling this way or I'm whatever. But as far as when you say, so then let's take the next step to go and get treatment or to go and have an assessment, then that's where the fear comes in, because they feel like, African Americans go in the hospital and then they never come out, or they're again used as guinea pigs. This has been stated. Socioeconomic issues make it difficult for those living in these circumstances. It's time for us to open our mouths, and I can just say this myself. It's time for us to open up our mouths in our communities and use our voice. It's time for us to be compassionate. It's time for us to share our stories and share our struggles. That's the only way that people will understand that they're not alone, that it's not taboo to talk about the issues that you're having. We talk about everything else. We talk about how our marriages are messed up. We talk about how our kids are not acting right. We talk about the stuff that it really doesn't need to be talked about. And then we have these things that we don't share. And when you start to share, you realize that the next person has the same issue, if not something even worse. But the fact that you weren't judgmental and you came in a spirit of love and compassion, and you were genuinely interested and genuinely shared your heart, like that's huge. Embrace your voice. Talk about it. Really get out there. Use your influence. If you have influence with a group of people, or a certain person that has influence with other, like, talk about it. Keep talking about mental health, because it's important and it's definitely essential to us being able to be who we were created to be, to do what we were created to do. So I would just say to definitely use our voice. Be present and build trust so that they feel comfortable in speaking about their struggles. Refrain from being judgmental and be aware and sensitive of how you speak and what is being said. Our language has to change. Last, be an advocate and share your story. Use your voice and share your struggles and your resources. Most importantly, embrace your God-given voice to speak up and speak. You never know whose life you will be changing or saving. So I just want to say, use your voice. Speak up, speak out. Having a mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of. Having a mental illness is something that several people struggle with and don't even know that they're struggling with it. It may not be PTSD, it may not be depression, it may not be anxiety. It could be anything. But I say this all the time. We all have our issues. My issue may not be your issue, but I have one. But we all have one thing in common, one common denominator, and that is Jesus Christ. And He can change and deliver and heal anything and anyone. So I just want to encourage you, use your voice. Thank you.